Hello and welcome back to MLQ Replay. Week 7 is in the books. The postseason shape is quickly coming to fruition, and we've got some huge games both in the books and upcoming. We're here to talk about it, to break it all down. I'm Ethan Sturm. Joining me today, Nick Jablonski, Raghu Achukola, and Jack McGovern. Guys, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Happy to be here, Ethan.
Awesome. So let's get right into it because we have a lot of quiz to break down with the Super Series, and our 2 series in the other as well. So we're gonna start with one burning question, and my one burning question is about the South Division because things got very, very interesting in the South with the League City sweep over Kansas City this weekend. League City now has 3 wins. Kansas City currently has 2 wins. New Orleans also has 3 wins. There's all kind of permutations with the tiebreakers as well. My one burning question for you guys is who is not making it out of the South Division to MLQ championships? I'm going to throw it to Rags first.
Yeah, that is a very burning question. If I had to pick someone, it would probably be KC. I do think they're a really solid team. I think they're actually probably more middle of the pack. I would probably, in terms of, probably put them at maybe 3rd, right around San Antonio's level. But the problem is just that they're going to come down to Austin for a Super Series. That drive is going to be long. There's not going to have necessarily a full roster making it there. And one of the things that I saw in their League City series is that their beaters, they played pretty well, but they didn't take full advantage of the opportunities they were given. And against a beating squad like New Orleans, that's just going to kill them. So I don't see Kansas City. I think, I don't know, the tiebreakers in my head, maybe they wouldn't need to sweep. Maybe they'll go 2-1, but I think it would be a hard ask for them. So if anyone's not making it, I would put it at Kansas City.
If we're going to simplify and say that Austin sweeps both theirs, then they would need to win at least 2 games against New Orleans to pass League City again. And then obviously League City would then have to not win games against San Antonio as far as all. There's still a lot of permutations, a lot of games to be played in the South. Nick, I'll flip it to you next.
I feel like it has to be League City. Not necessarily because they're not going to put up a fight, but because this San Antonio team is going to come out angry after dropping that series to Kansas City. This is a team that feels like it should be second, if not first, in the South Division, and they're going to come out firing. They want to prove that. They've dropped a game to League City every year they've been a program, and I think the fact is that they want that clean sweep going into championships to prove that they are the dominant second team in this division.
And Jack, how about you?
Yeah, maybe Rags and I are prone to overreactions, but I think I'm also going to say that I'm worried about Kansas City. This was not the type of performance that I think they wanted to put on for the rest of the division. And these were key games that they lost to League City. And League City is playing their last series against San Antonio at home. Kansas City is going to be on the road and, like you said, need 2 out of 3 from New Orleans. So when I've done the math, it's increasingly complicated for the Stampede to get to championships.
Yeah, and there's some real complex permutations with the San Antonio roster, not only being on the road, but also with the Team USA camp that I believe is happening in the week leading up to that match. So it'll be interesting to see how that all breaks down. We saw that a short rostered San Antonio struggled against Kansas City. So it's anybody's series. I think in just about all these series, it's going to be really interesting to see how things come down on the stretch. But let's get into talking about the series that we actually had this weekend. League City, as we've alluded to in this conversation, comes out and sweeps Kansas City on their home turf, returning that home turf advantage favor that Kansas City got a week prior. Rags, what about this League City team felt different this week than maybe we've seen in their first 2 series of the season?
I think they just were able to be very, very patient and sort of like stick to their guns. I think usually we're used to just being I don't know, just like a run and gun type team, just highs and lows, sort of a roller coaster. But like there were so many times in which I saw like a League City drive just get stuffed, get frustrated at the very last second. People beat before, just one pass going slightly over, shots going slightly to the one side, and I never shake them in a sense. I never saw them let Kansas City come back into games. They just
think we might have lost Rags there. So I'm going to throw over to Jack. Jack, what did you see from this League City team this weekend?
Yeah, I think they really kept their heads and were able to fight back in multiple games. They were really taking full advantage of the opportunities that their beaters were creating in the half court, just pouncing on the opportunities, anticipating what their beaters were able to do. Especially Kevin Raber, I thought was fantastic, just really highly active and making incisive beats in the half court that put his chasers in a position to score. It was an impressive display on offense from the Legends.
Yeah, I mean, across the way when it comes to Kansas City, I mean, we saw some strong beating from them. And while they didn't have all of those players, they did still have Dewick with them this weekend as well. So what do you think kind of the underperformance from Kansas City might have come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard without a star player like DME, who someone like Adam Heald had really thrived playing off ball, Billy Quatch too, and suddenly this weekend they're back on ball and needing to create more. And, the Stampede definitely put points on the board and were leading some games, but it just wasn't enough. And I think, with the short roster, I think the beaters really struggled to keep up with the activity of the deeper Legends core in the Texas Heat. So I think the opportunities in the beater game just weren't as available for Kansas City, and they weren't able to break apart the Legends defense because of it.
Yeah, Rags, we didn't get to talk to you in the wake of the first Kansas City series. So what kind of impressed you in that series, and what kind of was a letdown more for you in this series?
I think it's just taking advantage of the opportunities they were given, and I don't know if it was the Heat or their short rostered and their chasing depth or what it was really there, but Kansas City had impressive beating in the sense that, like, if you looked at some of their switch on pitch play, they kept control. There was, I think, moments where it was like 3 or 4 minutes of pure control on the snitch. There were moments where they were just playing great coordination with their beaters at the hoops, tagging into play just in time to beat out just like a last second drive by League City, holding off League City's chasers just enough to position someone in a place to make that tap deep. But they weren't being aggressive with it, right? So you have control. You use it to make a play on defense. I didn't see their beaters sort of doing it on offense, right? So like there was a sort of almost like tunnel vision where the beaters had a mission saying, I'm going to win this exchange or lose this exchange, and then I'm going to stop Quaffle. And then when they won the exchange, they didn't do much more with it. There was a play, I think I saw Justin DeWick or one of their beaters block a ball just straight down, and then they just moved around it. There was no press that came off that, for example. And then there was another where when they were at snitch on pitch, both beaters stayed on the snitch for a long time, and League City, I think, had both beaters beat and running back. And I was just wondering, like, Brennan and Justin, if they could have just, like, shifted over to Quaffle play for about 15 seconds, force a reset or something, that could have been so useful for them. And so, like, when I look at wasted opportunities, that's what come to mind that I saw in League City, that they didn't waste that many opportunities in San Antonio.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, like, how depth plays a factor. You think of, like, the college game sometimes where the rosters aren't as deep, and the way that really affects beating, and the way that you can't be everywhere on the field for 30 straight minutes. No beater can do that. And at some point, you have to make some calculations on, am I going to run one more press, or am I going to be able to be fresh for another couple of minutes? So it's interesting to see what factor that might have played. Nick, we've talked a lot about, maybe the South isn't the physical division it's been in the past. Maybe that's moved to other regions. League City is a team that's always hung their hat on it. KC, maybe not so much. How do you think physicality played into this series?
I think San Antonio is another team that has in the past hung their hat on physicality, and the roster they brought to Kansas City wasn't necessarily the most physical all the way through, and that allowed players like DME, right, like Adam Heald, like Billy, to continue to make their one move and then drive in and make the incisive pass. And the fact is that this League City team wasn't allowing that to happen. A lot of times Kansas City was catching the ball in not the most opportune spots and then not able to get to the spots they needed to make that pass across. We saw in the beginning of Game 3 that they were willing to make that move, right, and get around the physicality. But once League City stepped it back up and wasn't allowing them to those dangerous spots, then the offense slowed pretty drastically.
Jack, as we get into kind of the decisive moments of this season, snitch play is obviously going to play a factor. And I feel like we've really started to write some narratives about snitch play in this season. I think one that we're definitely going to talk about later in the North Division is both teams we saw this weekend and their struggles in that regard. League City is a team who spent all of last year abandoning the snitch. They get 2 big snitch grabs this weekend. Kansas City, without Joe Goulet, who is one of their main seekers, not able to produce as much in the seeker game. How much do you think that may be a problem for Kansas City going forward? And secondly, do you think this could help League City as it tries to get a spot and maybe make some waves as it did last year in the lower bracket of MLQ Championship?
Definitely. I think we are seeing this year that you cannot ignore the snitch. That sounds obvious maybe, but teams that have really gone for their snitch catches and devoted resources have often been rewarded. And I think League City, with their deeper beater core that was able to be more active, were able to take advantage of the lack of depth in Kansas City to just create more opportunities. I believe it was John Alvarez with both catches for League City. No, Ashton is shaking his head. We will get the right name. My apologies.
Juan Acevedo caught one of the snitches.
There we go.
I believe.
So yeah, the Legends, I think, have a really great formula here. And I think it's going to be key for them heading into that San Antonio series.
Yeah, I think you touched on an important thing, the fact that we have to mention multiple names, and that it really feels like having that rotation where you have different players that can match up differently against different snitches is the way you catch snitches in Major League Quidditch. There's not going to be a ton of gimme snitches, especially as we get into the bigger games, especially as we get to championship. And you need to fight in that right matchup for the snitch that you're going to be coming up against. Rags, kind of looking forward to that San Antonio League City series. Given what you saw from League City, maybe somewhat of an improvement, do you think they can potentially stack up to take a game or two off of San Antonio, as they have in the past?
That's a good question. I think I'm still going to have to say no. I know San Antonio has not had a good season so far, definitely compared to what they might have expected from themselves. But I think what I saw from San Antonio is just a lot of points left on the table. And I think while this League City team still has a lot of room to grow, I just think San Antonio just figures it out when they play each other.
Yeah. And Jack, just the last thing. Obviously, something we didn't even mention is League City gets this sweep without Hayden Boyes, one of the players we've talked about basically the most about this team. There was a lot of talk that DME wasn't there for Kansas City, but arguably the star of League City also wasn't there. So how do you think League City maybe slightly more effectively filled in those gaps than Kansas City did?
Yeah, that's a huge point. I think John White really stepped up, a player who wasn't at the first 2 Legends series of the year, away series. He's going to be with them for their home series. I thought he was fantastic. Just one of those players who was able to find driving lanes behind beaters and make the right passes, find some open shots. I thought he really filled the void left by Hayden Boyes, who, like you said, is really one of their most important players in the quaffle game.
For sure. All right. Well, we're going to jump into our first interview of the night, and we're going to talk to the head coach of the League City Legends, Ashton Lewis. Ashton, thanks so much for coming on today. Not sure we have your audio quite yet.
Are we good now? We good, everybody?
You are good.
All right. Yeah, no, appreciate you guys having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. So first I want to ask you, personally, your long journey through MLQ, originally first making a roster and then becoming the head coach of a team. Talk to me about your experience as a head coach in this first season.
So I'll tell you from the jump, I was a practice squad player for the League City Legends for 2 years, and then eventually made a roster, basically didn't play. And then last season, our last season that we just had with Dylan Freeman as head coach was probably the most playing time I ever got. I scored the most goals I've ever scored, and I probably played some of the best Quidditch I've ever played. And it was, it's because League City's got like a crazy long history of great chasers. And if you want to be successful for the Legends, you got to put in the work outside of practice. There's a lot of people who showed up that were more talented than I am and still are more talented than I am, even though they're getting older and have children and don't have time to work out as much. They're still better athletes than I am. But for the most part, man, the path to coaching was just, I felt like, and I think in years past, you can ask former League City Legends players as well. We have an immense amount of talent, and it's about getting it to all flow in the same direction. And that's been, the goal for this season. We have multiple offensive and defensive sets. I'm sure if people have been watching the film, they know exactly what they are. As a matter of fact, one of our players, Caleb, who was not on the roster for this weekend, but is still one of our young stars out there. He plays for Baylor. He's leading the Baylor program back to being an official team, and he's a huge part of it. He actually tested at some of the highest athleticism numbers at our combine that we had before the season started. But he also accidentally snitched on one of our plays. Luckily, we didn't run it right when he said it on film, so we don't have to worry about people understanding it.
So you mentioned him coming over from the Baylor program. Obviously, a college program that has huge effect on this team this season is Sam Houston State. So talk about kind of the players from that team and kind of the program overall and how that's kind of become such a key part of the League City Legends.
Yeah, so Sam Houston has always played a huge role in the success of every single iteration of the League City Legends, and I think we all know that from top to bottom. I can sit here and talk about Chris Dorsey. I know you guys talk about Hayden all the time. I call him MVP Hayden because he truly is damn near unstoppable when he's on the field, and there's no question about it whatsoever. Plays great defense, plays great offense. He's the kind of guy that when you challenge him, I can tell you this right now. Joan Alexander, our general manager, was on the sideline controlling the lines, making sure who people were going in and out. And her phone was blowing up from Hayden texting her the entire time because he wasn't available to play. And she literally had to text him to shut up. So that's a huge part of it. Hayden's a part of it. We talk about Brandon Kubana, who, if you talk about the hard-hitting part of the League City Legends this entire season, he's probably got like 3 of our top 5 hardest hits. And he takes great pride in it. We talk about Chris Dorsey, who honestly, all 3 of those guys, I think, should be, candidates for Team USA, the developmental roster when it's all said and done. And I know Sam Houston's got so much talent across the board that it's hard to like pinpoint one individual person. But overall, like that, we have our rookie of the year so far that I think me and Hayden and Joan all agree about. Mallory Hughes, who's a Sam Houston State University player, playing chaser. And she was actually, if Kansas City wasn't as good as they were and we had a bigger lead, she was going to go out there and beat for the first time ever in Quidditch in the middle of a Major League Quidditch matchup. So we have her. We have Maddie Kyle, who's been you could talk about being undersized, has the most hustle, has the most heart probably out of anybody on our entire roster because she's small and she's trying to find her way in this sport, and she doesn't let the fact that she's small deter her from being successful. And so I always appreciate it. We got Ashton Butler as well. He's like a 6'5" keeper that we're working on getting him more reps in. Nathan Wilkinson, who sadly he wasn't available either because of an injury, but he's a guy who I feel like has the right mentality. He's always trying to get better, always trying to develop, always trying to figure out what he can do to take that next step. And it reminds me a lot of my old teammates who now play for the San Antonio Soldados, who are constantly trying to push themselves at a higher rate to develop at a faster pace than they're supposed to be at. Because one thing that this season has really brought to light is that we are asking way too much of college freshmen and college sophomores going up against adults, like legitimate adults that have like 401k plans and everything like that. So we're asking them to do too much, and they've done more than I could possibly ever imagine that they were capable of. And we're not even close to being where we're at yet, because we got practice on Thursday and it's not going to be fun. That's all I'm going to say. Like we went out there, we got 3 wins. You know, we get 24 hours to celebrate it. Then we move on to the next thing. They know what the next challenge is. They know that we have to beat a bunch of our old friends to be able to go to championships. And I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. So
awesome. So obviously you guys start out the season getting swept 3-0 by Austin. Austin's a tough team. I mean, you guys have never beaten them in program history.
Never been interested in how good Austin is. Always been very upset with how poorly we played against them. Those guys, they're world-class athletes. We took a bunch of freshmen and sophomore out of college and some club players, and you know, we got our most goals that we've ever scored against the Outlaws in Legends history against them in all 3 of their games. So it was really upsetting, because we went back and watched the film. And yeah, for every amazing play that we made, we had 5 plays that we could have made that we didn't, that were really simple ones. But Austin, as always, ridiculous level of talent, ridiculous level of preparation, and of course, amazing mentality across the board. They're focused on winning, and they found a way to be able to be focused on winning without being jerks to each other, which is amazing in sports in general.
But then you go down to New Orleans, and you know, you have those tight games, and you can't find a way to get the win in any of them. How do you, as head coach, you know, keep team morale up to kind of come back and get a win like you did this weekend?
Tell you what, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. After New Orleans, you know, we all were chilling at the Airbnb. Some people drove back that same night, but a good chunk of us were like chilling at the Airbnb, and I was not about the whole like let's have fun type night kind of deal. You know, we go 0-3 on the road against the team, and really what it came down to is I wasn't upset at the team. I was upset at myself. I didn't have the team prepared for a certain defense that went out there, and if you watch the film, you know what defense it was. It's the point keeper. I didn't have a set that we needed to have prepared for that and to communicate how we're supposed to beat that. Obviously, every single game that we're playing up against and every team that we face this season, the experience has been heavily in favor of our opponent, and I've never thought that that's been a valid reason for why we go out there and perform poorly. But I didn't have the team in a position to be able to win, and then subsequently the results showed on that one. We had our best defensive performance of the season versus Curse, and just couldn't come up with a goal to save our lives. We had drops across the board. We had people who were making late reads. We had people who were trying to hero ball unnecessarily. And then on top of that, we you know, it was just really tough because it looked like it was day and night once we crossed half pitch. We played so well on the defensive half, and then the offensive half, it looked like we had never played Quidditch a single day in our lives. But that, once again, like 100% on me. It was not anything other than lack of me having the team prepared to be able to go out there and succeed.
So for your younger players to go out and get, first of all, their first win in MLQ, then their first series win, then their first sweep, what does that mean for them in the program?
You know, man, they went out there, won. I remember how excited I was when the Legends when I got my first win as an official Legend, and it felt like, and I don't know if this is true necessarily, but it felt like everybody just kind of like expected to go out there and win, just like we do. Like, we were upset when we lost 0-3 to Austin. We were upset when we got swept by New Orleans, and when we go out there and win, that's just like the level of expectation. Like, for instance, you talk about Sam Houston, that's a good composition of the roster, right? They're Division II college national champs. They were upset that they lost 3 games by a combined 3 goals at nationals against teams that they thought they had a legit chance to beat. And so coming into MLQ, they already have that high level of expectation for themselves personally. They just have to be shown like this. You're taking a step from playing college Quidditch to the highest level of Quidditch on the planet in Major League Quidditch. And so it took them a while to adjust to it, and I think they're getting better, and I think they're putting the work in individually and when we come to practice, whether it be on Thursday or on Sundays and stuff like that. But it was pretty cool, man, but I'm not going to sit here and say that we like went out there and popped champagne or anything like that. But it was something that we expected to do because we knew we were prepared. And for every possible contingency that could happen. You saw a couple of those situations, the score before snitch on pitch, we were down by 4 goals in game 3, and everybody was on the sideline absolutely livid because they knew where those goals were at. They knew where those goals were at that we didn't score. And it was very upsetting for them as players, I barely had to even say anything. I called a timeout, and I may or may not have said a couple of curse words, but everything else was them yelling at each other and playing better. And they went out there and they did their thing and they got their sweep. They earned that. And I'm super proud of them as a coach at every single facet and every single step of the way, because it felt like a lot of people got to express their own individual style as Quidditch players, but also were within the confines of what our structure, offense and defense wise is.
Awesome. Well, Ashton, thank you so much for taking the time with us tonight. We look forward to seeing you guys play your last years. We hope to see you guys at championships.
No doubt. Can't wait to sweep San Antonio.
Awesome. Take care. All right, so we're going to jump over to the East Division now and talk about our first Super Series of the season, which featured the Washington Admirals, the Charlotte Aviators, and the Ottawa Black Bears. All three of the series within it coming down as sweeps. Washington going 6-0, Charlotte going 3-3, and Ottawa coming in at 0-6. Nick, I think we both are in the same boat where we feel like we've watched Charlotte play so many competitive games against the top three teams in the division and somehow not come up with a single win. What do you think was holding them back this week against Washington, or what was Washington doing to make it not possible for them to compete?
I think that the Charlotte team, first of all, is the scariest 0-9 program in MLQ history. Maybe only.
Whoa, they're 3-9. They're
3-9. Sorry, 0-9 against the others that have qualified for championships already. In that case, that's my bad. But they are scary. I think Washington finally found their way. I think Charlotte played a mark against them for at least part of the series, because they saw what New York was able to do against Washington, and Washington has learned, and Washington said, not this time. And Washington did what Washington should do with that level of quaffle play and absolutely shredded a marked defense. And I think that if you're going to play a marked defense against this level of Quidditch athlete, you're in for a bad time.
Yeah. Jack, what do you think, this Charlotte team, what have they impressed you by, as they're going to head into championships, be a fourth seed, have a very long trip through a lower bracket, but it's nothing they haven't done in the past. They did the same thing last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an encouraging performance from the Charlotte Aviators. A couple things. I think they were using the spaces on the wings more effectively to draw out beaters and open up spaces for some of the cuts that they've made in the past, especially with someone like Lee Hodge operating on the wings. I love that look when the Aviators just allow them to go to work on the sides, and then you have other people cutting towards the hoops. I was happy to see that again, rather than the shooting through the front of the hoops, which seemed like the focal point of the offense earlier in the season. So I like what they were doing there. I thought they were mixing up their lines more effectively to get size on every line and make sure that they weren't leaving mismatches. Manowar continues to make huge steps in his development and be a fantastic addition to this Aviators team. So I think you're completely right that this is going to be a very dangerous Charlotte Aviators squad in the play-in bracket.
Yeah, I feel like Manowar could easily be their best quaffle player by the end of the summer. The steps he's been taking, and kind of nobody else necessarily stepping up into that to kind of take over that role, I feel like he could definitely be there. Nick, did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think Logan Hartman, we finally saw those flashes that we saw in last year in Game 3. We saw that spark. There's one play where I believe it's Trey Presley. They shoot the ball and it spikes off the hoop and it bounces off the floor, and Hartman just catches it one-handed and puts it straight through the hoop. And there's very few people in Quidditch who have that level of reaction to make that special. So if he continues to be able to dominate around the hoops like he did last year, then the Charlotte team gets increasingly dangerous very quickly.
Yeah. Why, besides, Logan, why do you think that third game was closer than the first two? And how do you think Washington managed to put it away?
The beaters, I think Charlotte has a stronger beating core that they continue to play the top end of for longer in that Game 3. Ryan Davis transferred over to beater, and they played very well for the first 10 minutes. There's one play, I think, where they're fighting for a bludger. The Washington beater comes over to try and clean it up with control, and Davis lets go of the bludger they're contesting to catch the bludger that the Washington beater throws and walks away with control. And that's not a play that anyone who is devoting 50% of their time, minimum, to quaffle play should be making, and Davis was making it. So I think if they continue to play Davis and Richard as the beating pair, and continue to use both of them, then there's going to be a very deadly, deeper beating core for Charlotte. And that sort of allowed them to take and make that run in game 3.
Jack, we seem to have gone from having those early season concerns about the Washington offense from that New York series into being more convinced by them in the Boston series, into being, as Nick was alluding to, quite convinced this weekend. What have you seen in the continued, improvement, or at least efficiency? Because I don't think improvement's necessarily the word. There's a lot of talent in this roster over this course this weekend from the Washington offense.
Yeah, 2 things. I mean, first, I think both teams really have cleaned up their some of their mistakes in the quaffle game, just drop passes, overthrown passes, especially with some really creative players. For the Admirals, that kind of stuff is going to happen, and with more time, more experience practicing with each other, some of those just early season mistakes start to go away. And then 2, I think early in the season, we gave a lot of grief to Justin Cole for ball carrying so much and not playing off ball. Maybe the Admirals were seeing something that we weren't. Not that Justin Cole is not a fantastic off-ball player, but he's really making it work on ball, and especially in game 3 with Tyler Trudeau out, was able to really tear apart that Charlotte Aviators defense. So yeah, props to the Admirals and Justin Cole for becoming a really great on-ball player at the MLQ level.
Nick, we've talked a lot about these East Division teams switching back and forth between mark and zone, whether it's for matchup reasons or just to kind of not have things that are showing on film, etc. Do you think we're going to see these teams doing matchup-dependent defenses at championships? Yes, and then do you think that's going to make them better or maybe stretch their resources thinner against these other teams come championship?
I think it depends on the team, right? I think we are going to see these matchup-dependent defenses. I think that you have to at this point. There's no other option. These teams are too well prepared on tape to not have something planned for each individual team. But teams like Washington, who have so much experience in the quaffle game, in playing all of these things, you have like Tyler Trudeau was part of the Emerson team that pioneered the original 2 at the hoops zone defense kind of thing, right? This is going back to that year. We'll talk about Minneapolis in a little bit, but this same idea of that a lot of those players are part of the program that pioneered the 3 trees defense along with Baylor. You're going to have these things, and there's expectations there with those. But a younger team like Boston, right, where a lot of the college teams have only ever played a 2-2 zone. I know that our 2 programs had some other options in the mix, but it was never not their default. Maybe not Harvard.
It's generous.
I mean, but that's the thing, right? This Boston team's going to maybe have to make some decisions about that that are a bit different than this Washington team. And the Charlotte team clearly made the wrong decision at times this weekend, and we'll learn from that and grow. But I think you have to have different options no matter what. And I think it will stretch some teams' resources too thin.
Rags, what do you think about the way these defenses are seeming to play more matchup dependent? And, do you think that's something that's going to spread out through the sport? Or do you think because of the more intensive MLQ practice schedules, maybe compared to like a USQ club practice schedule, we're seeing it more, and maybe we'll keep seeing it more in MLQ, but maybe not overall throughout the entire U.S. Quidditch scene?
I think we'll definitely see it throughout the entire U.S. Quidditch Club scene, and it might not start necessarily with just your average USQ club team, which doesn't regularly practice at that level. It could spread from like MLQ to the top club teams do this already, but also like USQ college teams, the top ones that are coached by all these players with a lot of experience, a lot of them on MLQ teams this summer. I think a bunch of those players will take that back to USQ, and it's crazy because like it seems like every year we Ashton, our guest, mentioned it, but like we ask these like college players to do more and more. But I think that's something we'll start to see more and more is college players and definitely USQ club players playing matchup dependent Quidditch and really just like, sort of bring the sport towards where like a lot of other sports are, where there's like playbooks for like every little matchup that we have, which is really, really fun, really crazy considering like we're all of us have been in the sport for like quite some time. So it's crazy, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I think we'll see it where there are coaches at this point, right? That's the answer. Like college teams that had coaches were already doing this. Penn State was already doing this. There are programs that when you have people who are not necessarily focused on their improvement as players and more so on the improvement of the team as a whole is where we're going to see it. Like I don't necessarily think we're going to see it with Bosnia at any super high level, right? Or these teams that practice once a week, but we will see teams that actively put in the effort to learn this and build this together. Probably more so at the college team level, honestly, because they all live in the same place and have 3 or 4 practices a week, most of them.
Yeah. Nick, I believe one of our 3 burning questions about Washington was the seeking game. They have consistently won seeking games. I believe they didn't do it against New York. I think it was 2-1. But TJ Generette was coming back from an injury that weekend. He was playing limited. Didn't have the most explosive weekend. He had a good weekend against Boston and came up with a grab in that not-finished game 3 that potentially could swing that game as it doesn't get finished, and comes up big again this weekend. What do you think about this Washington snitch game? What do you think they're doing better or differently, and how do you think they can kind of keep that going in the championship?
I mean, one of the questions we'll have to ask TJ in a few minutes is what did that 50-50 reach against Kellen teach him in the seeking game? And if that's the case, because against Boston, we saw a lot more conservative efforts, right? We didn't necessarily see the attempts to play against the other team seeker. And that's where you lose out a lot on this case. Like this Washington team is full of athletes. They can throw the snitch and they have those different looks, right? They have the big physical seeker in Tyler Trudeau. They have the quicker seeker in TJ Generette. They can continue to play the matchups against the snitch in a way a lot of these teams can't, right? Even Rochester, we talk about as having a very solid seeking game. Kip Alport is a seeker in the Harry Greenhouse style of setup and go. And if they don't have that other opportunity, then they tend to struggle. But I'm curious to see this Washington team has a lot of different options at seeker, and that definitely helps them in the snitch matchup.
Awesome. So before we go to our interview, I just do want to bring up Ottawa very quickly. It seems like, every single time we see them, they're taking another step. This is an extremely, extremely young Ottawa team. They're mainly college players in a country that hasn't even been able to play Quidditch for a few years. But like we said, every game seems to be another step. Nick, what did you see from Ottawa this weekend?
I am so excited about the future of Canadian Quidditch as a whole, right? If these Ottawa players can continue, it doesn't necessarily show in the scoreboard that they're improving, but they are improving. This is a team that continues to build on the fundamentals of Quidditch and continues to be stronger and stronger each game they play. And if they are improving at this consistent of a rate and continue to work together, then that's really, really great for the future of Canadian Quidditch. Because we've talked a lot about how Toronto is built on a lot of those veterans and that sort of program side of things. And this Ottawa team is going to develop and get better and better. And I'm very excited to see them sort of move in that future direction.
Yeah, and you say it doesn't show on the scoreboard, but I would argue, that a 100-point call for point differential game against Charlotte, that is a very different point from where they were in New York. This is a team who's doing some of the biggest travel in MLQ. We've talked about how much that affects South teams. Ottawa had to come down to New York. They came down to Washington. Obviously, they had their home series against Boston, which, might have been their, soups and nuts best performance overall. But it'll be fun to see this team grow. Of course, it's great that they're getting extra reps at the Scavenger Showdown in a few weeks where they'll be taking on Toronto. I believe that's in 2 weeks from today. Apologies to Amanda Dallas if I got that wrong. But yeah, so let's close up the book on that Super Series and bring in our second interview. As Nick alluded to, chaser and seeker for the Washington Admirals, TJ Generette. TJ, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So TJ, something we've alluded to before, you basically played 2 total weekends of competitive Quidditch before your first MLQ season a year ago. Then you actually got to play a full college season before your second season. How different has this experience been compared to your first season with the Admirals?
It's been a lot more comfortable for me. Having that year of USQ definitely helped a lot. And then I had more of a leadership role in the USQ season with Maryland. So it is a different vibe, but it's also just a lot easier to go out there and just be a player rather than being like a team manager and a coach at the same time. Just go out there and do what you do at your position, and then, all the administrative stuff isn't on your end.
Yeah. So obviously you guys come out week 1 and you guys don't get the result you want with New York taking you down 2-1 in a very, very closely competitive series. Kind of what was the vibe within the team, and how did you guys kind of bounce back to, play that great series against Boston and then come out and obviously have everything you wanted with the 6-0 this weekend?
It was more so like a wake-up call, and we never let it get to our head. A lot of projections were like, oh, this Washington team's gonna, be number 1 in the division and all this stuff, but we already knew that we have to earn these wins, especially starting off last year. I believe we started off 0-5 before we got a bunch of wins in a row. We knew where it could lead to, and last year started the same way with New York, and we dropped 3 to New York. So when you went down 0-2, it was kind of like, oh, we've been here before. Do we want to have the same season we had last year? And coming back and winning that 3rd game, I think, got us right back on track.
So Nick and I were talking about, the improvement of the snitch on pitch games around the snitch specifically for Washington this season. You guys had a really rough time of it last year. What do you feel has changed in that regard, and how do you feel you've kind of changed personally as a seeker?
I think personally I've definitely improved a lot as seeker, being the primary seeker for Maryland the entire year. But also, I just think our SOP has been amazing from our beaters and our chasers just overall. All this weekend, I can't think of a game where we weren't dominating SOP as far as beaters go. And the game, I know we didn't catch it in the first Ottawa game, and then I believe the first Charlotte game, it was a really long time before we caught. But however, we had so much time with the snitch, and our beaters was just doing amazing, giving us those looks. And then similar to the situation where game 3 of Boston, their seeker got 1 look, we get 1 look, we catch. Game 2 against Charlotte, we get that 1 look and we catch. So just getting those opportunities this year. And then I know you mentioned the 50-50 scenario, or someone mentioned that with Kellen. I definitely learned from that scenario. And I believe Ryan Davis is the best seeker there is in the league right now. You just don't give people like that looks. So you don't want to make it a 50-50 when you know someone has the edge on you, and you just play smart. It's not an ego game. You know your teammates are there to back you up.
Yeah. Hey, TJ. So in regards to the Quaffle game, right, there was a lot of talk about how this Washington team has some of the best Quaffle players in the league, and it continues to be the super creative team and one of the few teams that can score against 2 bludgers without bludger support. Period. And we hadn't really seen that until this weekend. Can you sort of talk about the development, not necessarily that you weren't great against Boston or New York or anything like that, but just that like the creativity really started flowing this weekend against Charlotte. We saw a lot more fast breaking, a lot more sort of, I like to call it fun Quidditch. Can you speak to that for a little bit?
I honestly think we probably gave the most unique looks we gave as far as lineups we have all season. That definitely helps, being out there with different people and just giving the other team different looks. And I feel like a lot of teams getting to this mindset where it's like, oh, we have control. No way someone's going to drive in the middle of our team and take a shot or take a pass. And I think a lot of teams just aren't expecting you to, call them on their defense. If you say you're going to stop me, then stop me, right? And I think when you get so many different lineups, the team, everyone's always good vibes on the sideline, pumping everyone up. And it's just, we utilize our depth. And I think toast. Sorry. We utilize depth. And honestly, I just think the other teams had a hard time adjusting because we were giving them different looks every 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, as someone who is very pro fun Quidditch and taking those risks, that's music to my ears, and I look forward to the rest of the season.
Hey TJ, I'm also pro fun Quidditch for the record. But I wanted to ask about your transition in the Chaser game from more of a kind of spark plug, like lower minutes role to like the kind of role this year where you're closing games on the pitch, and just you really have the ball in your hands a lot. What's that been like for you, and like what specifically from Maryland, playing with Maryland this past year, do you feel like you've improved upon and brought to the MLQ season this year?
Yeah, I think I kind of had the same, not to call it arc, but transition with Maryland at the beginning of the Maryland season. I would definitely play a lot of minutes, but I tried to avoid going multiple possessions in a row where I'm the only one touching the quaffle, or there's one pass, one look, and then going. And then there would be times where, specifically in the Harvard game, this USQ, our first game against Harvard, where I would come down and score 2-3 possessions, and then I wouldn't touch the quaffle for 3-4 possessions because I feel like I'm doing too much, right? And there's situations where I could tell you every turnover I've had this weekend over the goals I had, but I'm okay with that because at least that shows that I'm trying to make something happen with the quaffle, and I'm more okay with going out there and making those mistakes, because while they're turnovers, I still think most of them are opportunities to score, and it's way better than a pass going out of bounds, in my opinion. Just a pass going over someone's head or something like that.
So TJ, you have someone who was across the field from you in that Harvard game on this call. My question is, in terms of this, I think all four of us here who are part of this interview, part of this hosting group, all four of us played. None of us have ever felt what it's like to high step on a Quidditch pitch. Can you explain what that feeling is to maybe break someone's ankles or like high step or do all of this flashy stuff that I think none of us have ever really experienced?
I think it's really funny. I think a lot of the time when I go back and watch the film, I'm like, oh, why was I doing that? I don't really remember it in the moment, but when I'm out there in the field, it just kind of comes natural. And I think a lot of people are like, well, what is this guy doing? And then I'm past them at the hoops because they're so confused on what I was doing. So I don't know. I think it's kind of fun. I don't really know if it does anything, but I think it's an interesting look. It looks cool.
I think we're all pro looking cool here, though none of us are quite capable of this.
Yeah. There's definitely some clips of you from that Harvard game that I have saved away for future use. They're good clips. TJ, my last question for you tonight. Ever since you joined the sport, it's kind of trended back to that Texas wins all the championships state. I think Texas win every championship in all leagues since you rejoined the sport. You've now seen every East Division team at some point this season. How you feel about the strength of the division and its chances come championships?
I think the East Division is the most interesting division out there. Leading up into a couple weeks ago, we were the only division not getting swept every weekend. So I think that was pretty interesting. I think we're definitely the strongest division out there, but, I only care if my team comes out on top. So I want to do everything in my power to make sure that happens.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing you play the rest of the season, both in that conclusion of that Boston-Washington series, if you manage to make it to that, as well as championship. Best of luck with the rest of your season, TJ. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good night.
All right, so let's get to our series of the week between Indianapolis and Minneapolis, with a spot in the both North Division Championship and a clinch spot into MLQ Championship on the line. Minneapolis comes out and delivers the sweep on Indianapolis at home in front of quite a large fan base, which was quite awesome to see. Jack, you were on the call for this series. What did Minneapolis manage to do to kind of separate themselves, if only slightly, but consistently, from Indianapolis?
Yeah. First of all, they brought a great roster to the series, and they were really locked in and focused, prepared from weeks of practicing. You could tell it on the field. They were just executing their passes, moving the ball really well, making the types of cuts that are hard to track, and they were hitting those passes. So on offense, I thought this was kind of a well-oiled Minneapolis Monarchs team, unselfish, sharing the ball, it was really I felt like a team effort, and you could feel that. And then in the beating game, they have the partnerships that they have so much trust in each other, and they play off each other so well. Especially Cody Narvison and Gracie Johnson, I thought were fantastic. Just catching bludgers left and right, supporting each other at the right times. It was just exciting to see such a strong performance from the Monarchs in front of their home crowd.
Nick, we talked a lot about how Minneapolis' beaters didn't necessarily get tested in 2021. Obviously, this Indianapolis team, as it stands, is a test with Ted Walters and Matt Brown back in the roster rotation. It seems like they passed the test. What did you see from them, and kind of what do you think it means for their abilities to potentially go far at championship this year?
I think this Minneapolis team has depth all the way through. I mean, I definitely would agree that Cody Narvison and Gracie Johnson were the highest highs. But when you have the North Division MVP not present and you continue to dominate this strong Minneapolis beating core all the way down, it's just an impressive beating core all the way through. Maybe a little inconsistent at times, but the fact that they can continue to build upon this and go toe-to-toe with some of the strongest beaters in the North Division and go and continue through is really a testament to what this team can do. I'm very curious to see if they do match up against an East Division team at championships, because this East Division has such strong beating cores all the way through the top 4 teams, how they match up, and it'll be a real statement if they can continue to hold water with those teams.
Yeah, just to jump in quickly here, I think Minneapolis wasn't always holding bludger control. This was interesting, but they were doing more with their bludgers, I thought. And so there were times where Indy had two, but together the Minneapolis beaters were able to, just clear enough space for their offense to find openings and get goals. And that's what Quidditch is ultimately about. And so I think the coordination was just much stronger from Minneapolis, and that was the difference in the series.
Nick, we were both there a year ago for this series, which was kind of put in a mud pit, which definitely affected the way it played out. But both of our takeaways in Indianapolis had no answers for how to score on a zone. It kind of felt like more of the same this weekend. What did you see in that regard?
You want to talk about mixing up defenses and situational defenses? This Minnesota team mixes up defenses. We saw Mark, we saw 2-2, we saw the patented 3 trees defense that they break out. And Minneapolis struggled against all of them, I think, or Indianapolis struggled against all of them, I think, but especially against the zones. We continue to see Indianapolis look to move the ball sort of around in that diamond shape, trying to get the ball to the back. And the fact is that if you don't drive off of one of those 2 points before dishing to the back in that diamond shape and don't make the zone move, then the zone is the same when you flip it around to the back. But if you make the zone collapse, which is difficult, but if you make the zone collapse based on one of those drives, then you can force it to make mistakes. And this Indianapolis team still doesn't necessarily do that super well. They were finding a few things at the end. They had that little mid-range shot in Game 3, especially that they were hitting on that top hoop, which we've seen against a 2-2 is pretty open if you can get into the middle of the lane.
Yeah, I thought, just quickly, I'll add that Minneapolis going to the 3 trees hoop defense in games 2 and 3 was a really big moment. And Indianapolis was slow, I thought, to recognize how to break down that specific zone defense. And there were times where they had a beater, Mike Moralic, Matt Brown, camped out on one of the hoops, ready to beat out the Minneapolis defending chaser, but the Indy chasing core wasn't seeing the opportunity quickly enough, and it's gone before you know it. So they have to anticipate that. They have to see where their beaters are going and know what the defense is at all times.
So I think one of the elephant in the room here is the fact that nobody caught a snitch this weekend, which means each of these 2 teams has now caught one snitch in 6 games. I don't think any of us necessarily see either of these teams as, a powerhouse on the national level when we get to championships. And when you want to play spoiler, you need to catch some snitches. So what parts of these problems, Jack, do you think are fixable, and which parts don't you think are fixable?
Yeah, the not fixable parts. Both of these teams are missing from last year a seeker who has been selected to Team USA at some point in their career. For Minneapolis, Henry Bear Benson. For Indy, Jeff Siwick. So those players are not walking through the door. The fixable part is both of these teams at times are making choices not to devote enough attention towards the snitch, I think. And they're not trying as many people as seeker as I would. I think you got to really explore up and down your roster, find players with experience in wrestling, experience in other forms of hand-to-hand combat sports, where they could have some kind of opportunity against the snitch, and honestly just keep trying different looks. So experimentation, I think, is something that both teams can continue to work on.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I think in games 2 and 3, where Minneapolis was leading heading into snitch on pitch, I think they did a really, really great job of understanding that if they traded goals with Indianapolis and didn't let them catch a snitch, they were winning the game. And I think they did it was really, really impressive to watch how Cody Narveson and Gracie Johnson continued to flip back and forth between snitch and quaffle to sort of not give the Indy Seekers any specific amounts of time. Though I think on the other side, I think Indy was so scared of trading goals with Minneapolis that they didn't buy their Seekers any more than maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds against the snitch. And we saw, I know we talked about Tad Walters a couple of weeks ago, but Tad Walters, by the end of game 3, when Adil had snitched 3 very long games, was getting good looks, but was only bought 6 or 7 seconds to really make that. And I think that if this Indianapolis team recognizes, especially since it was a catch to win situation, that if they can buy 15 seconds there, then maybe they come away with the grab and they come away with that game 3 win. And it's definitely a learning experience for future games in a week.
For sure. Yeah, huge games coming up next week. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Nick, 2 players when we were watching the Detroit series, and we talked about it here on MLQ Replay, that really jumped out. Emma Persons in the quaffle game for Minneapolis, and Gracie Johnson in the beater game for Indianapolis, both young players. And obviously, Detroit a little bit more of an overmatched team against Minneapolis, but obviously this is one of their big tests in the North Division. So how do you think the 2 of them kind of showed up this weekend?
I think there's a youth revolution in Quidditch, and Persons and Johnson should be some of the faces of that youth revolution as it stands. Emma Persons is doing things that we see out of players who have been playing the sport for 5, 6, 7 years and just beginning to develop at this point, right? She is confident in space. She is taking control of the defense. She is yelling at her teammates when they screw up and defining what the team needs to do and recognizing patterns that I didn't recognize till 4, 5, 6 years into this. And I'm probably one of the more geeky watch film, figure out the patterns going on people in the sport. And she's recognizing them within 10 seconds. Gracie Johnson is covering space like I've only seen maybe 4 or 5 beaters do, period. And she's doing it at this young, right? She is all over the pitch. She is playing that sort of snitch on pitch strategy that we only see the elite beaters play, where she is flipping between quaffle and snitch, and she's doing it at this age. That's insane. This is just I know that they're still making mistakes, right? They're still young and they're still figuring things out, but they are doing things that we have only seen happen when players have had 4, 5, 6 years to develop, and they're doing that in much less time.
Yeah, you gave a kind of a Rachel L. Silver comp for Gracie Johnson, not on air, but off air earlier, and you definitely see flashes of it on the pitch. Obviously, a lot more fine tuning to come, but a much younger player. Rachel's got a lot more years under her belt, so it'll be fun to see how those things kind of come through. Jack, my last question before we get to our interview: Minneapolis with the win. makes it to the North Division Championship game. They face Rochester next Sunday for the North Division Championship, trying to defend their title. Do you think this Minneapolis team can hang with this Rochester team?
I do, depending on what kind of roster they bring to South Bend. Rochester is a physical team. They're going to make lots of tackles, and I think Minneapolis has to be prepared for that and has to have the players available who can break those tackles, essentially, is what it comes down to, because Rochester is going to have that high press, and their beaters are going to be protecting it. You can do a good bit with tap beats, but at a certain point, you're going to need to be breaking tackles against Rochester, or at the very least, making the types of cuts around the tackles that kind of take the physicality out of the game. I think that's much harder. Perhaps it's in the cards for the Monarchs. I was impressed with their passing against Indy, but I'm excited to see what kind of group they're bringing to South Bend.
Awesome, yeah. Nick, do you think this Minneapolis team can break down that press? And any other thoughts you have on the series?
I think if there's anyone who's going to come out with a plan for this press, it's head coach Cody Narveson. I think Narveson is going to watch the tape. I think he's going to come through with an answer for this. This Minnesota team is also uniquely built to break this press. I'd love to see what Max Meyer does from the back corner against this press. That's going to be so much fun to watch that speed sort of against this fast-playing Rochester team and see what they can do. And I'm sure Rochester's going to come out with something unique too. They've heard enough of us talking about their press. I did a breakdown on their press. They have to come out with something different for North Champs, or this Minneapolis team is going to come with this. And I do think that they also, with that high press that wants to engage on these beaters, if you put Johnson and Narveson out against those beaters that are going to play high up and high aggressive, you're going to end up with a lot of caught bludgers and a lot of bludgers on the Minneapolis side of the field and a lot of fast breaks going the other way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because, I do think there's hubris, I think is too negative a term, but I think Rochester is proud of their press and they think they can hold up even while it is showing on tape. So I do think they're going to at least show it out. I mean, maybe if Minneapolis absolutely breaks it down, they'll make adjustments. And on the Minneapolis side, if Cody Narveson is breaking on the tape, tap beats.
We do have to. One other point, though. I mean, Rochester does have the advantage. Kip Halpor is arguably a elite seeker at this point. And if Minneapolis doesn't respect that and continues to play this split between the beater and the seeker game, or between the quaffle and the seeker game and stitch on pitch, Kip Halpor is the kind of seeker that needs 6 seconds, not 15. So that's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, and with a good rotation behind him as well. All right, let's jump into our last interview of the night. Chaser for the Minneapolis Monarchs, who we were talking about earlier, Emma Persons. Emma, thanks so much for coming on tonight.
Hi, Ethan. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. So you were kind of talking a little bit before the show, kind of about your trip into Quidditch, because you've only been playing for a couple of years with COVID kind of getting in the way. It's kind of been a broken up couple of years. So kind of talk to us about that, and also what part this Monarchs team has kind of played in both your development in Quidditch and your interest in Quidditch.
Yeah, so I started 2019. I played in the fall season with Minnesota Quidditch at the U before COVID hit, and then that kind of threw a wrench in my plans. And then I was kind of, I don't know, a little bit disengaged with the sport. But head coach Cody Narveson reached out and was like, "Hey, I think you should try out for Monarchs in summer of 2021." And I was like, okay, sounds great. And so then I got to play with them all season, last season, which was phenomenal. Like almost just like my first complete season. Getting to play Boston was just really cool. So that was a lot of fun. And then I didn't play fall of 2021, but came back and played with TC Frost for the spring of 2022. Just getting to play a lot with experienced players like Cody and Obi, and even getting to play with April and Gracie too. So that was a lot of fun. But this Monarchs team is definitely what kept me in Quidditch and keeps me developing every day that I play.
So speaking of that development, something we've alluded to on this show previously and tonight, you're obviously playing a lot with the ball in your hand right now. So kind of how has that development come along for you? kind of when did that start? Where did it come from? And also kind of how have you felt growing into that role?
Yeah, so last summer I definitely played off ball all the time. I don't know if I ever really ball carried at all. But then coming into frost season, the ball kind of just got put in my hands at practice. One of our male chasers, Terry Carlson, was like, "It's okay to mess up. Go mess up. Here's the ball." And I was like, "Okay, great." And kind of ran with that in practice a lot before we ever really tried it this Monarch season. But I've kind of just been ball carrying a lot in practice, and it's definitely something that I'm still getting used to, but that I really like. And I know that everybody that I play with has my back, and I think that's like a big part of gaining confidence on the pitch. So I just like really appreciate them all giving me the opportunity to ball carry for sure.
Yeah. Also awesome messaging from a teammate, because really the difference between good ball carriers and bad ball carriers are the ones who get the chances to make mistakes. Nobody is a good ball carrier right off the bat in Quidditch. It's way too complicated. There's way too many factors. You need to take the reps. So that is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys had one of the biggest crowds of the season for your home series this weekend. I know just in ticket sales alone, there was over 200 people. You probably had some people sneak in as well on top of that. So kind of how did you guys kind of go about, getting that kind of following, and also kind of what did it mean for the team on the pitch on game day?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I feel like all I did was share like posts that said, "Come watch us play Quidditch." I know that like OB and Beater Nicole Nelson were like passing out flyers with the QR code, like, "Hey, come watch us play Quidditch." And everybody's just really excited about the fact that we play. And I know that we talk about it all the time. So we had like a lot of family there and stuff. But I know that definitely being able to come off the pitch absolutely gassed, and then just have your family or all your friends or people you don't even know cheering for you on the sidelines and grabbing water and making eye contact or waving or whatever definitely keeps you like motivated to play, but also just like in that fun mindset to keep like playing, So it was great.
Yeah. Hey, Emma. I guess my question revolves around your team seems to have two different, we'll call it mindsets, right? In the fact that you have like the Max Myers speed look on one line, and then you get to the Terry Carlson, Alex O'Banner drive and just continue. But you seem to be effective on both, like with both lines, right? Whether it's in snitch on pitch with those big drive and dish players, or sort of letting Max cook on the wings. Can you sort of explain how you learn to adjust to both of those and play very, very well with both different styles? Because that's definitely not easy.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, first of all. But I know that it took a lot of like questions, and also I already mentioned Terry is like probably one of the people that has like mentored me through this the most. But also like Max, OB, Seth, Mike, all of these people that I get to play with, they're very approachable. Like they're all people that I have played a lot longer than I have. And just between every rep being like, "Hey, what worked, what didn't, where would you like me to go, what did I do wrong?" And them being able to communicate is really great. And also a conversation that I've had with Alex a lot is like talking about ego and trusting each other on the pitch. And I know that TJ brought that up too. And it's like, that's a huge part of this sport. And I'm really glad that the people that I get to play with are very aware of that. And I think that just helps us all adjust playing with different styles.
Hey, Emma, thanks for coming on. I was wondering if you could talk to me just a little bit about how excited you are for the future of Quidditch in Minnesota. Like, it seems like there's just a lot of momentum. You have some younger players from the University of Minnesota program on the Monarchs roster. The Monarchs seem like they're taking steps each year. What does it feel like to be a part of that, and what are you hoping for in the future?
Oh, it's so cool. I feel like all I do is talk about Quidditch all the time. And I love talking about like development. And I swear every day, like when I was playing with Frost this spring, I was still going to Minnesota practices, even though they're not an official team. And it's like they would have a full roster worth of people there. They're ready to come back as an official team. And those kids are completely dedicated to coming to practice every week. And coming to practice like when there's no practice, you know what I mean? Like you'll drive by the practice field and there'll be like 4 kids out there, and it's like I love that energy. I just love playing a competitive sport, playing Quidditch, wanting to get better, and they all definitely have that energy. And the kind of the veterans on this team have definitely embraced that too. And so I'm excited to see where it goes. I think this program is only going to get a lot stronger in the future. So.
Evan, Nick was talking earlier about how you guys really switched up defenses a lot over the course of this series. Played basically 3 different looks at defense at minimum. Was that always the game plan? Was it going to be kind of like come in with 1 and see and adjust from there, or kind of what was the background of your defensive decisions coming into the series?
Yeah, so we really kind of debuted this like 1-1-2 defense, as having like a point and then a keeper, and that was kind of what our game plan was. But knowing full and well that we would have to adjust and that things would look different, and adding the 1-1-2, I just remember maybe OB saying like it's just another defense in our pocket, like it's just another thing that we can run. And yeah, I think we tried the 2-2 and then we switched to the 3 trees, and it was like if one thing didn't work, we had something else. And I really like playing like that, like adjusting situationally. And I think everybody was completely ready to do that this weekend. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
So looking ahead to next week, quick turnaround into North Division Championship. The good news is that you have already clinched your bid. The bad news is that now you got to prep for a very good team in this Rochester side. A new team that you guys as a franchise haven't had the chance to play yet. Or at least in the last 2 years. You personally haven't gotten to play them. Have you guys gotten to watch much tape on them yet? And what about them are you excited to see come next weekend?
Personally, their tape is on. That's what I will be doing this week. I haven't done it yet, but I know that I don't know anybody that watches more tape than like Nathan Podolsky and Cody Narvison. And I know that our beaters are already fully geared up to play Rochester, and I have full trust in them. And yeah, I know that we've got a couple practices this week, and I'm excited to run our adjustments in practice, adjusting from Indy to Rochester's offense, like to see what our defenses will look like and stuff like that. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, Evan, thank you so much for taking the time. Looking forward to be there in person, watching you guys play next weekend. Best of luck in North Division Championship as well as at MLQ Championship.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, that's going to do it for another edition of MLQ Replay. As I was just mentioning, North Division Championship will be taking place all weekend this weekend. The format is as follows. Rochester and Minneapolis are already clinched in the MLQ Championship. They'll just be playing for the North Division crown. That match will be on Sunday. On Saturday, we will see Toronto playing Indianapolis, with the winner finishing in 3rd, getting the 3rd seed in qualifying. Cleveland and Detroit will play an elimination game, with the winner staying alive and the loser getting eliminated. And the winner of that series will play the loser of Toronto versus Indianapolis for the 4th and final spot in the North Division. We'll be running all weekend long, all the action on the MLQ YouTube, so don't miss it. This weekend as well, the East Gen's Next Gen series will be taking place, something that I'll be very much looking forward to catching up on after a North Division champion, after we're done there, because it's going to be practice squads from 4 East Division franchises getting to play some action. It's our first time doing Next Gen away from MLQ Championship, so I'm really excited to see how that goes. Additionally, check out our Patreon. Cuts with Cupid are still going strong. I think we have another episode coming out soon. We've our entire game film. Nick's doing a lot of great work on there as well. He's done some breakdowns, as he mentioned. Definitely worth checking out. Big announcement as well coming from MLQ and USQ tomorrow. I don't know if I'm technically allowed to say that, but that's what you get for sticking around for an hour plus of content tonight. So yeah, definitely check in first thing tomorrow morning. Me and Jack, I think, both have somewhat long nights ahead of us. Thanks everybody so much for watching. As always, we hope you tune in North Division Championship this weekend. Take care and have a good night.